modern life is materially miraculous in many respects. And I don't want to totally invalidate that. But so check this out. If you owned 200 vinyl records as a teenager in the 1970s, you're probably feeling pretty good about yourself and your curated collection. Enough music to impress a hot date, to set the mood. You probably worked pretty hard and spent a good amount of your pay or your allowance to acquire the records for the collection. Now, today, every child and adult with a phone carries something closer to the Library of Alexandria of music and other content in their freaking pockets. So, why doesn't that feel like immense abundance and make us joyful, with a sense that we're infinitely richer than our counterparts in the 70s? I think this example hits at the crux of our evolutionary tech issues. Something like the law of diminishing returns in economics, which works like this. If you eat one chocolate bar, it tastes delicious. And the second one is still pretty good. But then the third starts making you feel sick. And beyond that, there's no more benefit. But if you can't stop despite the negative consequences, then that presents more like addiction. So here's how I understand the threshold so far. At first, technology extended you. A hammer extends the hand to build what you need with or without the tool, hunting, shelter, clothes, weapons, maybe some toys or art and recreation. A wheel extends the legs to where you were already headed anyway, maybe as a nomadic or wanderer. My glasses help me see. I could see before. I just want to keep seeing. Or a telescope. We were always looking at the stars as ancient people. Now we can direct where we want to look a little bit closer. Obviously, that is simple technology and takes us way back in the evolution, but touching on our origins helps us ascertain the original impetus of civilization and its progress and development. Somewhere much further on this long arc of technology, but in our lifetime, the relationship reversed. Think of the camera and the typewriter and the calculator, still mostly extensions of the person because humans were telling and then writing their stories on leaves in prehistory and painting scenes on cave walls and then canvases and then photographing the scenes. So the tools, especially the digital ones now, no longer merely extend out from the person, they extend into the person and into the psyche and into the nervous system. The direction is more inward, and it's disturbing that it comes inward from political and corporate machinery or will, not straightforwardly from a single predator or an enemy trying to break in to our hut and rob you. Culturally, wherever that turning point exists in time represents a mythic line we've crossed. I was thinking with a Skyrim video playing in the background on YouTube that this notion may help explain the widespread and enduring attraction to medieval fantasy, or I don't know what they call it, fairy core or cottage core in video games and now AI videos in like taverns or lantern lit paths or stone hearths and blockbuster shows and movies like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, etc. They become sensations, right? It's a mythic sweet spot, human scale before the industrial scale. Now, I'm not saying I want to go back to that era or to feudalism or the plague. No, for me, it's not really about time, but values within social constructs. This is also why folks don't obsess over hunter gatherer content, in the same way. Most of us aren't longing for a time of pure survival. The implicit longing is for connection and community with people and the earth and our bodies even before disembodiment. Let's pause for a moment and I invite you to close your eyes. Now notice the somatic sensations when you visualize and conjure in your mind the following textures: stone, fire, leather, wood, handheld instruments, smoke, rain, forged metal, warm bread, horses, moss, snow, temples, and scrolls. Okay, you can open your eyes. I'm increasingly treating what I would call tech anxiety in my counseling sessions. The uncertainty related to unprecedented acceleration of change. Parents are like, what should I even be teaching my kids? What should they learn? What is work and meaning and wisdom going to look like? Um, yeah, should I give them a religious worldview? And they're scared that their kids are probably not going to be better off than them, which feels very unnatural because that wasn't the case for decade after decade after decade. Change has always been the premise of life, but this rate is hard to adjust to. Our bodies and minds have evolved to endure great difficulty, but not great uncertainty. I've discussed this in detail before on my podcast, but psych research shows that uncertainty is more stressful than certainty of either safety or danger. And what I mean by that is it elicits more of a nervous system reaction. In a 2016 study published in Nature Communications, participants learned whether visual cues predicted electric shocks. Their subjective stress was monitored and measured as pupil dilation and skin conductance, with stress highest around a 50-50 chance of shock, the point where the mind cannot settle into either safety or danger. Think about how unsettling the following questions are from the perspective of ancient history and modern history. Is this technology helping me or replacing me? Well, the hammer or the shovel ain't replacing anyone. You need someone to use those, nor typewriters or calculators or the first computers. Another one, is this person ignoring me or just busy? In the mythic sweet spot, how do you know if someone's ignoring you? Because they won't look at you or respond to you when you call out right in front of them. But now we call out digitally into the cloud and can feel very uncertain about what the response or lack of a response really means. And so more uncertainty. So we're getting maxed out on uncertainty. But I'm not even sure that that's how uncertain it all is. Uh, I don't mean to endorse anything like anti-modernism. Again, I feel like that's unfair to time. It's an energy and a hegemony and a social dominance orientation and ideologies that I think push everything to the brink of ecological collapse, brink of mental health crisis, brink of annihilation even. But an anti-modernism movement feels like it could become its own unhealthy fantasy or justification for checking out entirely or living in virtual reality, like the Skyrim game only. Most of all, I don't want it for me to become some kind of refusal to love the world I'm actually in, especially love for the earth beneath my feet. And that's what's great about living in New Mexico. It's like, I know I'm in modern times, but I get to look at mountains and forests. So am I anti-modern or pro-enchantment? Next, I want to briefly explore the impact of all this I'm talking about on religion, as in technology also reshapes what religion's impact was. Let's look at three core themes of religion, and maybe um, these are new terms which can be fun to learn. The first one is cosmology. What kind of universe are we in? Religion told us that. Two is teleology, which teleo is Greek for um, the direction or meaning. So, what are we here for? And three, eschatology. How does the story end? So, in cosmology, religion gives us the cosmos, creation, origin, gods, angels, demons, heaven, hell, and the earth as the stage of life and where the drama of humanity plays out, and karma and grace and divinity. In teleology, religion gave life a name: salvation, liberation, love, devotion, service, awakening, union with God, virtue, what is righteous, surrender, wisdom, truth, realization. And eschatology, religion gave prophecy of the end, the apocalypse, the final judgment, the rapture, the yugas, the dissolution of the universe, messianic arrival or return, the end or the renewal of the world, and divine revelation. Let's break down these three now in the light of AI. Here's what I think about big tech and cosmology. The data center image of the data center is potent because it finally localizes the abstraction of artificial intelligence into a physical neighbor. The AI build out is at like almost mythic scale and reminds me in some ways of the ancient megalithic structures like the Great Pyramid or Stonehenge, which took many years or decades even, and probably thousands of laborers. I think 100,000 laborers with the Great Pyramid, or aliens, according to ancient astronaut theorists. Uh, Both AI and the megaliths required tremendous amounts of political will and prioritization of resources. You know, both translate something abstract into something concrete. All pervading divinity could be worshipped in the temple, in the house of God or gods. And now the abstract cloud I was talking about of our data, is actually stored in physical server farms requiring massive amounts of resources. The Brookings Institution notes that a typical data center can use about 300,000 gallons of water per day, while the larger facilities can use an estimated 5 million gallons daily, roughly comparable to a town of up to 50,000 residents. And then there are the energy demands. I just read I think it was the New York Times, about Meta's expanded data center in Louisiana. And it's been reported that it is potentially using around 6 times more power than all of New Orleans, and on one of the hottest days of the year. Another billionaire on TV was proposing a project in Utah, a data center that would require the energy on a scale that would exceed the entire state's current average electricity consumption. And this comes on the heels of a lengthy climate change campaign from the establishment, pushing families to conserve energy in their homes, with their showers, with their cars, and wanting everybody to use electric vehicles. So that's pretty creepy, right? That the centers need all this energy, and specifically fresh drinking water, and more drinking water than we need. And this is still in infancy. So the capital contrast is wild too. Reuters reported that NVIDIA has partnered with major firms to help raise more than 500 billion in third-party capital for the AI infrastructure. And Axios said recently that the AI investment for building this stuff this year may be around 600 billion, about 2% of total GDP. So yeah, the equivalent of Taj Mahals getting erected throughout the world. And then teleology. What are we here for? Because this material contrast becomes obscene, really. And just think about how goofy it is to watch data centers rise at mythic scale while ordinary people may have to wait 6 months to see a rheumatologist or a dermatologist or some other specialist for a serious medical condition, assuming they can even afford to make that appointment, while being uninsured or underinsured with higher and higher deductibles and so on. So there's this juxtaposition between data centers popping up everywhere and a subversive kind of poverty, the digital dust bowl. You know, technically, poverty has decreased recently by certain metrics. The official poverty rate fell to 10% in 2024. But I think the system has found a way to manage this and perpetuate an invisible and therefore insidious kind of poverty, a no margin poverty. And this circles back to my first question about why having the equivalent of the Library of Alexandria in my pocket doesn't feel like abundance. Working people can have a decent standard of living where they're mostly safe, they're mostly fed, they're accessing plenty of entertainment and content, but they can't let their foot off the gas, not even for a week or two in the case of millions. So what the fuck? I'm sorry, WTF. The important statistic to me is the absence of margin here, regardless, or not totally regardless. Uh, but even if less folks are below the actual poverty line, and I say this from a public health and mental health perspective, the Federal Reserve reports that only 63% of adults could cover a $400 emergency expense with cash, and only 55% have been able to set aside 3 months of emergency savings. So that means that tens of millions of people in our country are one medical incident or one car accident or one layoff away from total crisis. And this helps me explain the 20-year gap in average lifespan between poor men and rich men. It's stress. We know stress is a killer. So there's that. And then welfare and credit and debt kind of maintaining this, excuse me, this treadmill of financial fragility. If there were only debit cards and no credit cards, well, what would the standard of living actually look like then? Pretty austere. I work with clients who have college degrees, full time jobs, single, no kids, and qualify for Medicaid and SNAP benefits. I think that's evidence of a failed state because of the lack of dignity in work and daily work and full time work. But no one at the top will admit it. And in a hyper materialist system, who gets to interpret this suffering? This distress is diagnosed and treated in terms of functionality. In psychology, in assessments, there's a global functioning assessment, which branches into productivity, performance, neurochemistry, aka drugs. Not saying they don't have a role in helping, but this also means market opportunities. Um, and then there's this strange pop culture phenomena around aging and labor. Actors that were older adults when I was a kid are still making movies and shows in their 80s. I see Harrison Ford or Robert De Niro in stuff all the time. And on the homepage of streaming apps, just saw that Steve Martin is going on a banjo tour at like 81 years old, looking and sounding fantastic. The Rolling Stones. Well, I don't even need to say anything with the Rolling Stones because you immediately know what I mean. The point is understood, but just by saying the Rolling Stones now, they're going to be the first band that goes on a 100-year anniversary tour. Willie Nelson joked that we need to start thinking, kids need to start thinking about what kind of world they're going to be leaving to him and Keith Richards. I get doing what you love as long as you can. But I also wonder, is this purposefully normalizing the retirement for working people, specifically those whose work is not getting paid millions to have fun making shows and playing music? Just as the average homebuyer is almost middle aged, the average retiree is getting older and older if they get to retire at all. So, what's this new teleology? Just keep going, keep producing, keep adapting. People are going to have like five careers in one life now, where their previous four are extinct by the end. Occupational burnout can be exhaustion from living in this pattern, this system with no answer to the teleological question. What is this all for? And then thirdly, eschatology. How does the story end? Religion always gave away the ending. Spoiler alert, end times prophecy. Well, the world population is a little more than 8 billion in 2026. Data Reportal says the average global internet user spends 33 hours and 13 minutes per week consuming online media, and estimates that humanity as a whole now spends close to 1.5 billion years per year consuming digital media. So the rough math is 1.5 billion digital media years divided by the population, roughly 8.2 billion total human years, equals about 18% of all human time. And that accounts for sleep and infancy, the elderly, offline populations, everyone. So, at a minimum, online media consumption appears to absorb roughly 1/5 of total humanity time. And if we estimate waking life instead, the number rises. So, average adult sleep is around 7 hours per day, leaving about 17 waking hours. And using that rough waking time denominator, online media may absorb about 25% of waking humanity time. And it could be higher still because the report may not fully include offline, but still computer work or school screens, other workplace software, and so on. And also in sleep and in our dreams, people are technically in a virtual reality, albeit a biological one, but we're not engaging in our or making any contact with our shared world while we're asleep, right? So add that in, because then sleep and screen time together is the amount of time that we're not in the world. So that's nearly 40% of all humanity time now, spent either asleep or digitally mediated. In other words, physical reality may soon become the minority experience. And it's only a short matter of time before the screens are no longer necessary for screen time. Maybe because some neural interface or chips get integrated into our brains. Now, back to the digital dust bowl for a moment. The old internet was a wild and even hopeful innovation. It was a fertile, open, independent virtual place of strange little gardens. Now, no one enjoys those gardens or goes to those gardens. Everything is funneled into a handful of corporate mega marketplaces. Their sites and their search engines have fully cornered the internet, right, to direct all flows of traffic. And more disturbing, a study by Imperva reveals that the automated traffic, the bots, crossed the majority threshold in 2024 at 51%. And then it quickly rose to 53% last year. So I'm sure it's high, much higher now. With human traffic last year down to 47%. So my guess is that automated traffic activity and content will account for the entire internet, with humans still doing stuff online, creating and consuming, but amounting to less than 1% of everything. And that's more or less what's known as the dead internet theory. But that's not going to happen overnight where we're like, I can't believe this happened today. Um, we're already there for all intents and purposes. So I don't think engagement will suddenly become suspect, because people have already been arguing and flirting with bots for years in comment threads and so on. But pretty soon, everyone alive will have lived entirely in the internet era. So, what are they even going to compare themselves to? I mean, we don't spend time thinking about taking horses to work. So, imagine life as it is now in a metropolis. You commute to Chicago or wherever in traffic for an hour, surrounded by, from the suburbs, surrounded by other commuters, vehicles, and you work in a skyscraper with, let's say, 1,000 other employees, and you're passing them in the halls and in the elevators, and you go out of the building, you go to lunch, eh, and pushing through all kinds of people and waiting in line to order food, and then maybe some shopping, running some errands before heading home, around tons more people, and then looking back on all of the encounters, even just the visual encounters, and realizing it was unlikely that anyone you saw was also human. The trend is also closer to 100% of our time online, humanity time, all merging into screen time, and closer to 0% of us being what you encounter in that virtual reality. You may say, well, we still got to drive, so that won't be screen time or purely screen time. What about self-driving cars? They can do that, and then the person can be online. The car itself will be totally online, the self-driving car. Maybe even dreams will somehow be online when there's tech that shows you can learn, you can grow, you can earn if you plug this into your cortex. So this could be the coming end of the world, at least as we knew it, where the physical world becomes the minority experience, where the physical world becomes the minority share of consciousness. All right. Let me put a positive spin on this before the conversation. I'll conclude with this, which I find to be a hopeful stat. According to recent Pew research, 86% of Americans believe humans have a soul or spirit in addition to the physical body. Well, that feels like one of the most important majority demographics on the planet. I think something really wonderful, healing, restorative can blossom from that truth. That truth about our cosmology, teleology, and eschatology, the truth about what we are. And that tension is healthy, that we live in a hyper material society, but the majority of the planet is metaphysically oriented. That truth that we're not cogs in the machine. And I'll give